thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today, as you can see by the title and the thumbnail, I am talking about Marilyn Monroe. So I recently watched 10 of her movies, and I thought I would do a video ranking them from the one I liked the least to the one I liked the best. And I was inspired to do this because I recently finished Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates. My Franklin Library edition is right here next to my Marilyn figurine. Last week, I released a video doing a book review and summary about Blonde, if you want to check that out. But yeah, I also did one of these videos for Nicolas Cage back in April where I watched 10 of his movies and documented it. And I've been wanting to do that again for another actor. I just hadn't gotten around to it, but reading Blonde inspired me to do a Marilyn Monroe movie marathon. So it was really fun doing this once again. And I do want to start doing these types of videos, these movie marathon type videos more often. It won't be every month, but maybe every other month or something. And yeah, to make it interesting, I thought I would talk about these movies from the one I like the least to the one I like the most. Having said that, even the one at the bottom of the list, I would still recommend because even if the script isn't the best, Monroe was an amazing actress and her movies are definitely worth watching. She always gives a fantastic performance regardless of the script itself, you know. And I was raised on Turner Classic Movies, so I have been watching her movies since I was young, and so a lot of these I had seen before. There's only two, I think, maybe three that I had never seen. However, even the ones I had seen before, there's some where I hadn't seen them in like 15 plus years, so it had been a while. So it was really fun to return to her movies and to return to just old movies in general and just watch so many in a short period of time was just really fun. Anyway, let's just get right to it. So number 10 on the list is River of No Return from 1954. And the summary for this movie is: a river unites a farmer recently released from prison, his young son, and an ambitious saloon singer. In order to survive, each must be purged of anger, and each must learn to understand and care for others. And so it's funny this one is on the bottom of the list because I remember loving this movie when I was younger, and it's one we watched multiple times as I was growing up. But watching it this time around, I found it kind of forgettable, to be honest, and I wasn't always engaged. I do like Robert Mitchum, who is the lead alongside Marilyn Monroe, so I love them both, and like all the elements of a good frontier western were there, but for me something was lacking and I just had a hard time being truly invested in the story. Also, there's a scene where Robert Mitchum like attempts to rape Marilyn Monroe's character, which it just felt very out of place, and an image from that scene is what they use on the poster, which seems really weird and in bad taste, and I don't know why they did that. There was a lot of drama between Monroe and the director though, so at one point Robert Mitchum was like the go-between because she and the director weren't talking to each other. But anyway, I don't know if that has anything to do with the final product, but yeah, ultimately I just don't see myself ever watching this one again, even though, you know, it wasn't terrible, but I just didn't love it. Number 9 on the list is Niagara from 1953, and this one is about two couples who are visiting Niagara Falls when tensions between one wife and her husband reach the level of murder. And so this one, I like the first third because Marilyn Monroe is in a lot of the first third. She makes an appearance in the second act, but then by the third act, she just doesn't come back. And so I lost interest. The less she was in it, the less interested I was in the story. Even though I like Joseph Cotton, who plays her husband in this movie, I like him, but I had a hard time staying interested in this one. Also, the guy, Max Showalter, who plays, so you have Marilyn Monroe and Joseph Cotton as the main couple, but then you have this other couple, and the husband is played by Max Showalter, and he is terrible. His acting was just horrible, and so that was distracting as well. And yeah, ultimately by the time we got around to the third act, I was like, come on, let's just wrap this up. And I don't think this is a movie that people would still be talking about if it weren't for Marilyn Monroe being in it, you know? So she's amazing, but overall, once she's no longer in much of it, I just kind of lost interest. Number 8 is Let's Make Love from 1960, and the synopsis for this one is: when billionaire Jean-Marc Clement learns that he is to be satirized in an off-Broadway review, he passes himself off as an actor playing him in order to get closer to the beautiful star of the show, Amanda Dell. And Amanda Dell is, of course, played by Monroe. And I did enjoy this one. Also, Arthur Miller, who she was married to at the time, he made some changes to the script to make Marilyn Monroe's role have more substance to it. So I thought that was cool. And I do think the last 20 minutes of the movie might have been some of my favorite parts. But Monroe, she's not in a ton. However, this is one where I really do like the main actor, the guy who plays Jean-Marc. I enjoyed him, and he's working alongside Tony Randall, so you get a lot with them too, and I love Tony Randall. And this one does have some great cameos. We have Milton Berle, Gene Kelly, and Bing Crosby all playing themselves, and they're all teaching him. You know, Milton Berle is trying to teach Jean-Marc how how to be a great comedian. Then you have the great dancer Gene Kelly teaching him how to dance, and the great singer Bing Crosby teaching him how to sing. And then you have Marilyn Monroe's character who's trying to teach him how to act. So that could be saying that Marilyn Monroe was the great actress, right? Which she was. And so there are some maybe meta aspects to this movie, which I did enjoy. And even though the premise is pretty cliche about like the millionaire who's pretending to be someone else so that he can find a woman who falls in love with who he really is, and the ending too is cliche, nonetheless, I still really enjoyed it. It is a musical though, and I didn't love the musical numbers, so that's definitely taking some points away when I didn't enjoy the music that was in it. So yeah, it's not my favorite movie. Obviously, it's number 7 on the list, but I did enjoy it, and I did like the main lead, which is important because, yeah, Marilyn Monroe, she's in a fair amount, but she's not in all of it. So it's good that the main actor playing John Mark, he is very likable, and I did enjoy him. But ultimately, I think Marilyn Monroe should have been in more of it, and I wish the music was better. Number 7 is The Prince and the Showgirl from 1957. In this one, we have an American showgirl becomes entangled in political intrigue when the prince regent of a foreign country attempts to seduce her. And this one, again, is a cliche story where you have the normal person who is noticed by the prince, and then a romance sparks between her and this prince, and then as the synopsis says, she gets like involved in the political intrigue and all this stuff. So it's a cliche story, but again, because Marilyn Monroe was so funny and so charming in this movie, she definitely makes it worth watching. Laurence Olivier was fine. Like, he's pretty stern throughout the whole movie, but he does have a bit of a character arc, of course, thanks to the presence of this American showgirl in his life. The ending caught me off guard. That was not what I was expecting, and I wish there had been more emotion to the ending. Also, I was hoping that, because there's a ball that happens, and when Monroe shows up at the ball, she's wearing the same dress she's been wearing the whole movie, which it's a beautiful dress, but I mean, come on, like, I want to see some different wardrobe and some beautiful dresses, but we just see her in the same dress throughout the whole movie, and I was hoping they would switch up the wardrobe, because I can't be the only one who loves, you know, different outfits and different wardrobes, and especially a ball. Like, I was expecting some super elegant dress she was going to change into, but then it never happened. But anyway, so Marilyn Monroe, very charming, very funny, and she does have the right kind of chemistry with Laurence Olivier. They had drama on the set, but that's kind of works for the movie because he is annoyed by her in the movie for a lot of it, and so it kind of works that maybe he was also annoyed by her in real life. But regardless, she's very funny, very entertaining, and it is worth watching to see her performance. Not to sound like a broken record, because I've been saying that for all of these, but anyway. And then next up is The 7-Year Itch from 1955, and this one is about a man whose family goes away for the summer, and up until now he's been faithful, but once they're away, his overactive imagination is tempted by a beautiful neighbor. And with this one, the main actor in this movie, I didn't particularly like him. You know, with Let's Make Love, I really enjoyed the main actor in that movie, whereas in this one, the main guy, like, I just didn't think he was that funny or that enjoyable to watch or that likable, and so I didn't really love it when it was just focused on him, and his fantasies I didn't find especially funny, and I also just didn't love the premise itself. However, as usual, Marilyn Monroe in this movie is just so charming and stunning and magnetic and funny. Anytime she is on screen, like, she's incredible, and when she's involved in his fantasies, like, she was a great comedian, so she is just so hilarious and so cute and just incredible in this movie. And she has a scene that like made me giggle uncontrollably because she was so funny, and it's when he's imagining her doing that toothpaste commercial warning the woman about him, and she was hilarious in that scene. I absolutely loved it. So it's because of her performance and the script, right? Because the scenes with her were well written and funny. It's mainly the guy I just didn't enjoy, and again, some aspects of just the premise of the story I didn't enjoy either, about all these husbands that cheat on their husbands when the wives are away when it gets too hot. Don't love that. But yeah, also the main character, he keeps talking about his wife, and he keeps saying like 2 or 3 times, he's like, you know, she's not as young as she once was, she is 31. And 31, like, that's not old. So it's kind of silly that he's talking about her like that. But I guess that's the whole point, right? Anyway, I'm ranking this so high, like I said, because there are parts of the script that are genuinely funny, and there was a part that just made me laugh uncontrollably because it was just so silly and so ridiculous, but so amazing. And yeah, Monroe herself, anytime she's on screen, like, it's just fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her. Maybe not the movie as a whole, but anyway. And then next up is Don't Bother to Knock from 1952. And here, after being dumped by his girlfriend, an airline pilot pursues a babysitter in his hotel and gradually realizes she's dangerous. And so this is 1952, so this is Monroe, one of her earlier films. And along with her, we also have Anne Bancroft, who is in this movie as well. And both of them are just beautiful, and they're amazing actresses. Yeah, I did enjoy the plot itself. It is a suspense, and Marilyn Monroe plays a woman who has been through some difficult things and is damaged by these things and is not thinking straight. And there were some great lines, like between Anne Margaret and the main guy, I forget his name now, which he was fine. But I really love this movie for Marilyn Monroe and Anne Margaret. But anyway, yeah, there were some good lines that I enjoyed. And yeah, it was suspenseful. It was sad. But yeah, overall, I liked this one. It is based on a book, and I did read the book. I was going to do a book first movie for it, and then I just never did. I don't know why, but anyway, they did make some changes with her character. They made her more sympathetic in the movie, meaning Nell, Monroe's character, is more sympathetic in the movie than she had been in the book. But yeah, Monroe is fantastic here, and yeah, it's a great suspense thriller. Number 4 on this list. So this one, people are going to be upset that I'm putting this at number 4, because I'm sure a lot of people think this one should be much higher. But number 4 for me is Some Like It Hot from 1959. And this, of course, after 2 male musicians witness a mob hit, they flee the state in an all-female band disguised as women before other complications are set in. And ultimately with this one, it's a comedy, but I just didn't laugh as much as I would want to, considering it's a comedy. And I also thought they kind of took too long getting to Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon dressing in drag. It's like 30 whole minutes of just setup before we get to that part. So I thought they could have sped things up a bit there. I'm guessing because it was 1959 and having your lead actors dress in drag was probably controversial, I guess. And so maybe they felt the need to really show the audience that these guys were in a desperate situation or something, right? Because I feel like nowadays they would lessen that intro and just get to the point quicker. But I did absolutely love Jack Lemmon. He is hilarious in this. This is one I had seen before, and the ending, right? Like, it's an amazing ending. It is so good. I remember just loving that so much and laughing so much the first time I saw this. But the ending is probably, well, it's not the ending is the most memorable, funniest part, I would say. There are funny moments throughout, but again, I just didn't laugh as much as I would have liked. Marilyn Monroe is amazing and very charming, but this, I think, is the only movie where my favorite part was actually Jack Lemmon. So anytime it was Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis, like, it was fine. I enjoyed it, but I was like, oh, let's just get back to Jack Lemmon and Osgood, because like, they're the funniest part of this. It is a great movie. I can see why people love it so much, and I would highly recommend it. But ultimately, I'm putting it lower because, yeah, I guess I just didn't laugh as much as I would have liked. But it's obviously very iconic, and I highly recommend seeing it. And now again, this next one might be controversial that I'm putting it so high. People might think this should be lower. But number 3 on the list for me is Bus Stop from 1956. And it is about a naive but stubborn cowboy who falls in love with a saloon singer and tries to take her away against her will to get married and live on his ranch in Montana. So yeah, the first hour and 15 minutes of this movie or so is just so frustrating because the character of Bo, who is the Montana cowboy, he is so frustrating because he's just so mean, and he's seeing Monroe's character as like an animal that needs to be broken rather than a woman who has her own agency and her own choices and is her own person. Like, he literally lassos her while she's in line at a bus stop and takes her away, and nobody stops. So that too, the fact that like people are allowing her to be harassed in this way and they just think it's funny. So I get that, right? So many people complain about like this being a romance where the guy is horrible and he's wearing her down and he's harassing her and not taking no for an answer and seeing her as an object. However, this is going to get into spoilers. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, I guess just skip ahead to the next movie. But he does end up getting beat up though. So, because at first I was like, man, this movie is acting like it's okay to treat a woman this way. But then finally, you know, he does get beat up by these other men and they're like, hey, stop treating her this way. You can't do this. And so they force him to apologize to her and apologize to everybody else. And he finally like stops pestering her. And then when he becomes kinder and treats her with more respect is when she finally starts to think like, you know what, maybe I could have a life with him. And so it's not the best romance, of course, but it's not as bad as people say, I don't think. And also Monroe's performance, again, is incredible. And the guy who plays Beau is great too. I think everybody. And his father figure, it's not his actual dad, but the guy with the mustache, I forget the actor's name, but I've seen him in other things and he is just like such a likable guy. And then her friend at the saloon or at the bar she plays at, I loved her too. And yeah, Monroe is great because this movie has a lot of comedy where she's just so funny, but then there's just so many heartbreaking scenes or just like these scenes that just get to you, and she's just amazing throughout all of it. And she's great at playing a woman who like isn't that talented but is trying to make it, you know. And when she performs her song of Black Magic, like, oh man, she was just so good. And also when you think about this, like, because this was Monroe's first movie. She left Hollywood for a year and went to New York, and this was her first movie back where she had a new contract and she had more control over the movies she did. And she chose this movie to show that she is an actress to be taken seriously. So again, it's like it has the drama, it has the comedy, it has the romance, and then it also has a part where, you know, one, she has like a stage name, her character, which Monroe has a number of movies where her character has a stage name, which Marilyn Monroe herself, that was her stage name. But also you have the part where she's talking about how she wants to go to Hollywood and she's currently in Arizona and she's saying like, oh, I want to go to Hollywood where they actually treat people with respect, which of course she wasn't getting respect in Hollywood. And then you also have the part where she is at the rodeo and the two like Hollywood reporters are there and they want to get a picture because it's rumored that she's going to get married to this cowboy. And so she's like, oh, let me get my lipstick. And she bends over, and it's when she bends over and her rear end is showing that they snap the picture and that's the picture they want. And so just reflective of Monroe's own experience to some extent. Not entirely, of course, but yeah, so she's just so good in this. And again, like the acting by everybody is good. Yes, Beau is so frustrating, but he's meant to be frustrating. So I do think that actor did a good job. He was nominated for an Oscar, whereas Monroe wasn't, which is totally messed up because she should have been. She also has an accent in this one, which I feel like in Prince and the Showgirl, there were parts of that where she kind of had her bus stop accent to some extent. But yeah, she just gives an amazing performance. So watch this for her because she is incredible. And I do think, you know, it's a good message for the most part. Like, yeah, it's not the best romance. Also, when they go off to the ranch, the guy decides that he's not going to go. So it's only going to be Beau and Marilyn Monroe's character, Sherry. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. Like, they're just going to go live on this ranch, just the two of them, isolated and alone. Like, are there other people there? Because it seems like a bad idea to be so isolated. But anyway, ultimately, yeah, I went into this movie expecting to hate it because I did remember the premise and I hadn't watched it in a while. So, and I saw like other Letterboxd ratings where people were saying how terrible it was because it's about a guy who just wears a woman down until she finally says yes. But there is much more to it than just that. So give it a shot, give it an honest try. And if nothing else, again, you'll just get a fantastic performance from Marilyn Monroe. And then number 2 on this list is the movie I have seen the most often through the years, and that is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes from 1953. That is what my figurine is from. Of course, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, which is so freaking iconic. What an amazing musical number. And all of the songs in this movie, you know, Let's Make Love, my complaint was that I didn't love the music. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes though, like every song is just so incredible. Also, you have Jane Russell as her co-star, and I love that too, right? The two main leads are two women. So many of these movies I've been talking about, Monroe is like a secondary character who doesn't even show up until like 10 or 15 minutes into the movie. Whereas Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, like it is about Monroe and Russell's characters, Lorelei Lee and Dorothy Shaw. And I just love the friendship, and they have great chemistry together. Like you believe that they are close friends. And their costumes, the wardrobes they wear throughout this whole movie are just gorgeous and stunning, whether they're, you know, their costumes when they're performing, but also just when they're, you know, living their life in the movie. They just have amazing dresses that they're wearing. And I love too that this is 1953 and we're getting a movie about two women who, you know, and the song at the beginning about, you know, two girls from Little Rock where they had their hearts broken and they were used by men, and they're like, you know what, we're not going to be used by men anymore. We're going to make sure we get what we want out of the relationship too, and we're not just going to be used. I just love that theme to the movie, especially for the 50s. And again, I just just love that the focus is on Lorelai and Dorothy. All the men are just like these secondary characters that honestly just kind of fade into the background for the most part. Yeah, they just are amazing. The songs are incredible. It's just so fun. It's such a fun movie. And again, this one has a scene that just made me like, even though I've seen this so many times, watching it this time around, the scene made me laugh uncontrollably, and that is when Monroe is Lorelai, when she is trying to get out of that window on the boat, and she gets stuck, and Henry Spofford III, who is incredible in this movie, the 10-year-old boy, he's trying to help her, and he gets the blanket, and then the old man, Piggy, comes up, and that scene is hilarious. But I will say the one scene I don't love is when Dorothy dresses up as Lorelai and she puts on the blonde wig, and that part, I remember thinking that was super cringy when I was young, and I never liked that scene, and I still think it's super cringy now, so that's my only complaint. I don't know why I don't like it so much. It's just, I just feel uncomfortable and it feels super cringy every time. But regardless, if you have not watched this movie, what are you doing? Go watch it. It is fantastic. It is so much fun. It is so incredible. It's just epic and should be watched. But moving on to my number one choice is actually, as much as I love Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, my number one choice is The Misfits from 1961. And this was Monroe's last finished movie. She started Something's Gotta Give, but they never finished it. But The Misfits, this one was written by Arthur Miller, but as they were filming it, he was constantly doing rewrites, and as they were filming it, their marriage was deteriorating. And so this movie, her character is the most reflective to her, and same with Montgomery Clift, his character is also reflective of him in real life. Clark Gable is also in some ways reflective of his character, so Arthur Miller was definitely inspired by the cast. And yeah, this is just an incredible movie, and when you know the stories of the actors, their personal lives, it just makes it so much more powerful. And I read a review that called this movie haunted, and there's just a vibe to it where it just feels haunted, and it makes it even more powerful. And yeah, it's an incredible movie. So you have, first of all, it's about a divorcee who falls for an over-the-hill cowboy who is struggling to maintain his romantically independent lifestyle. And I had seen this one before many years ago, and the scene I remember the most is, of course, those last 30 minutes with the horses, which is a very powerful scene and very intense. But like throughout this whole movie, it's just every scene is powerful and intense, to be honest. And some scenes that really stuck out, you know, when Clark Gable, when they're at the rodeo, or after the rodeo, when they're at the bar and Marilyn Monroe, her character, is outside and he comes to get her and he's like, hey, I want you to come meet my kids. And he's drunk, and when they go back in the bar, they see that his kids have left. And so Clark Gable's character, Gay, he goes outside and he's calling for his son and his daughter who have left, because we're assuming they're embarrassed about him. And so he's calling out to them for them to come back to him, and why did they leave? And oh my gosh, that scene. Oh, it's amazing. Which Clark Gable, he said that after making this movie, or while making this movie, he said, now I have two movies I can be proud of, Gone with the Wind and this. And then he died like a few weeks after filming ended. But anyway, another scene that I really love too is when they're driving home from the rodeo and everybody's drunk and Eli Wallach is driving, which Eli Wallach, I feel like everybody gets so focused on Monroe, Montgomery Clift, and Gable, but Eli Wallach is incredible, and his character is the most unlikable and just so selfish and so entitled and bitter and resentful. Anyway, he's driving home and he's speeding, and Monroe is trying to calm him down to get him to drive slower. And then when they arrive at the house, like all of the men are drunk, and their drunk acting is excellent. I read that John Huston told Eli Wallach, his like acting tip, he told Wallach, you know, drunk people don't act drunk. Drunk people try to act sober. And yeah, they nailed it, which that's a big pet peeve of mine, is when drunk acting just isn't realistic, which comedies, they're doing it differently because they're wanting it to be funny. But I'm always impressed when someone can act drunk believably. And all of these three main guys were amazing. And Monroe too, when her character drinks in this. But anyway, yeah, so all three guys are just yelling and angry, and Monroe is trying to calm them down because her character is just very empathetic, and like too empathetic and sympathetic for others around her. And so she's trying to be the peacemaker and make other people happy, which, by the way, there's another amazing scene where Gable's character tells her, like, you're the saddest person I've ever known. And she's like, really? People always tell me I'm so happy. And he's like, that's because being around you makes them happy. So they therefore like are projecting their own emotions onto you, but you make people happy. And so they assume you're a happy person too, but you're not, which again is reflective of Monroe herself, and her character is like so desperate to be loved. And then she also like wants children but has reservations. And at the beginning of the movie, she's getting divorced and she meets her husband on the courtroom steps and he's like trying to talk to her and she's like, you know what? No, like you're not going to get me to feel sorry for you again. Which, by the way, when she's rehearsing her courtroom, what she's going to say for her divorce, I read that Arthur Miller actually took lines straight from the divorce court from when she divorced Joe DiMaggio. So that is what she said when getting divorced from DiMaggio. Also, Thelma Ritter is in this movie. She's in like the first half, the first 2/3, and I love her as an actress. And she brought some humor to this movie because she sees divorces almost like a marriage. And yeah, so she was great and she brought some comic relief. However, like 2/3 in, thereabouts, halfway through, her character leaves. And then from there is no comic relief. But anyway, and yeah, Montgomery Clift is incredible in this. He, of course, had his accident in 1956 and then he died in 1966. This movie was 61, so it was right in the middle of that. But yeah, his character just had an accident that messed up his face, just like Montgomery Clift had. And he keeps getting on these horses and hurting himself. And Montgomery Clift was the same. He was very self-sabotaging and just had a lot of issues in his own life that he was struggling with. And so if you have never seen his movies or looked into him, I highly recommend it. But yeah, anyway, I guess I've gone on long enough about this one, but it is going to stick with you. It is going to make you cry. Look into the behind the scenes. Like if you don't know, Eli Wallach, I think, is the only one really where his character isn't necessarily reflective of who he was in real life, but so many scenes with the others, which, okay, one last scene I want to talk about is when Monroe realizes that the horses are going to die. And so she's very upset. And Clark Gable is trying to convince her, like, it's not what you think, like, it's okay. And he compares it to her character had been a nightclub dancer. And so he says, like, as a dancer, you had talent and you were passionate and you put your heart and soul into your dancing, but the men watching, they didn't care about any of that. They just wanted to see your body and that's all it was to them. But he says how he sees like the heart and soul she puts into it and she's not, just a body. And that, of course, is very reflective of Monroe's acting career, right? Because she put her heart and soul into these performances, and yet so many of like the Hollywood executives and people who would see the movies, they didn't care. They just wanted to watch her because she looked good, right? And it was just about her looks. Yeah, so this is such an amazing movie. Obviously, the fact that she and Arthur Miller were struggling and their marriage was coming to an end I read that she didn't like this movie and didn't like her character, but I can see why. Her character herself is sexualized, but that was also just Monroe's experience. But yeah, anyway, so there's complicated behind the scenes stuff with this movie, but it is incredible. Highly, highly recommend. Yeah, I guess that wraps it up for my Marilyn Monroe movie marathon. Again, I would recommend all of these movies. River of No Return, was the bottom of the list, but even that one is, yeah, it's worth watching. Yeah, I guess that wraps it up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below what your favorite Marilyn Monroe movie is. Comment down below if you disagree with some of these rankings and just your thoughts on these movies. She has other movies too that I didn't list in this video. So if you like one of her other movies I didn't even talk about, comment down below and share what movie that is. And yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.